Good morning. I'd like to call the facility committee meeting to order. And noting that we have the 3 board members of the committee here, as well as administration and invited guests. I need approval of the agenda.
Someone second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And do we have any public comments? So I would like to welcome public, and I think we're starting with Heritage Elementary School, some steel install bids. Rich, are you taking that over for us, or Steve, do you have any introductory comments?
I'll just add at the beginning here that obviously we've been working with Vogel and EUA to continue to bring forward bids as we have started Heritage. We're certainly making great progress. We're excited about where we're at so far. As you know, we agreed to bring on vendors at different times to assist with our timeline to make sure we could hit our ultimate goal of having the school ready by September of 24. So we appreciate that you've been allowing us to bring bids in pieces. Rich is going to talk through the bid under item A, but then just to give the committee a little bit of a heads up, he's going to talk through under item B what the next couple of months will look like. So you can have a sense as the final pieces are being put together for Heritage Elementary School, what the committee is going to see over the next couple of months. And then Rich is going to join us for a discussion on contingency use. This is a conversation we had back in 2014 that we're wanting to have with the committee as well, to have some understanding of where the board members are today really with this topic. So for part A, we did have this bid on the agenda last month. We had 2 different bids on the agenda. But Rich asked to move this one forward to May so that he had the time to properly go through and vet the bids and the scope and review what we have in front of us tonight. So Rich has been doing that. I want to give him the opportunity to talk through this one, you know, the work that you put into it, the vetting of the bids, and where we're at as of this morning.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Thank you, Steve. Good morning, everybody. So the document that you have in front of you is in fact a bid tabulation on the structural steel erection. That bid tabulation, an effort to level the playing field, if you will. We send out a bid description that tries to identify the scope of work that we want all bidders to bid, so that we get that kind of level playing field and start out apples to apples. In this particular instance, the steel was issued as bid package 2, and then there were 4 subsequent revisions that helped clarify either sizes of members, or just, you know, plug some holes where we didn't have the design 100% complete. And as a steward of the district's dollars, I want to emphasize that's why we're asking for that extra time here. We just wanted to make sure that people were looking at this thing all through the same lens, or as close to the same lens as possible. There was one of the bidders that made some assumptions about how things would come from Endress, and it's not fair to the other bidders if they're not looking at it exactly the same way, right? Because who's to say that Endress is going to do all of those things that vendor assumed, right? So that took some volleys back and forth with said companies, and that was one of the reasons for the extra time. At the end of the day, I'm very confident that either of the 2 low bidders that are represented on this bid tab, they're very much in alignment with our schedule. And from a scope perspective now, I feel like Vogel Brothers has them truly apples to apples. I think this is a process that the board, as we sit here today, could be very confident in. Some of the upfront behind the scenes work that was done. No matter where we land, we're going to land with a contractor who I'm quite confident can do the job in respect. So I'm happy to field any specific questions as it relates to the bid tab. But that's really kind of how things were put together here.
So when it comes to history, maybe with either of them, do you see one, I mean, when we get into the construction process, change orders are a big thing. Do you see one over the other as going that route more so than, you know what I'm saying? If it's not identified in the scope, it's like, wow, it wasn't covered, so we're really gonna change over this to,
Based on, R.A. Smith, the structural engineer record, I will say has put together a pretty sound set of documents. The gaps that they had to plug in their revisions were sort of size related and not really a ton of impact on scope. In talking to both the low, they kind of reiterated that in the sense that they feel like the documents are very well thought out, well prepared. And I don't know that there is a lot of opportunity, quite honestly, that exists for change orders. As long as Vogel Brothers has the necessary things in place ahead of steel, I think we'll be in good shape there in either scenario ahead.
Okay.
I guess one of the things to look at, I know we've gone back and forth on local bidders, things like that. And in my mind, this is truly a local bidder because they are located in Waunakee. They are located in our district.
You're referring to Badgerland, yeah.
I'm referring to that.
Yes, sir. Yep, understood.
I know there's been a lot of discussion on well, I've got employees living here or, different leadership living here. But I think, those businesses that have the courage or fortitude to open a business in Waunakee and conduct a business in Waunakee, I think we should give them, consideration, on something like this. Because, we're tapping. So when it comes to local business, if we are going to give consideration to local vendors, they should be in our district in Badgerland is in it.
I mean, another consideration, I think of it too, Badgerland, this is their business, that's their only thing that they're really doing is steel erection. For the most part, JP Collin is a much larger thing, that's one aspect of their business, so they're gonna be a lot more focused on. Maybe I'm knowing the fact that they're gonna be more dedicated to that.
I think there's some legitimacy in that comment. Colin is, now, with that being said, they were pretty clear that steel is a steel division, right? And it's separate than their general contractor, but I think there's some validity to a certain extent in Ted's comment there. So, again, after vetting them, I think either more than capable of handling it. So.
I would think that the recommendation we are both Badgerland.
I would second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
If you don't mind, I'll just ask the committee members a related question. So when it comes to vendors who have a footprint in Waunakee, obviously we reached an agreement with Endress that was outside of an RFP process. And then Advanced Concrete did put in an RFP and were awarded a bid, as well as this is the second one from Badgerland. As Rich describes the process over the next couple of months, we'd appreciate hearing your thoughts about other local businesses and if there is a specific approach you would want us to use. We can certainly continue using this approach. A good example would be windows. If you want us to approach windows in a different way, let's talk about that before we get to that point. So let's, as Rich explained, what we're going to go over the next couple of months. If any committee members would like to see the businesses that have a footprint in Waunakee handled in a different way, this would be a good time to have that conversation with Rich as we move ahead. So I guess why don't you just talk about the next couple of months and then we'll see if there's any feedback on, local businesses in that process. Go ahead.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would just, I guess maybe preface things by saying, I think this board and our work that we've done together in identifying and onboarding some local subs, has been a very positive thing. With that being said, as we look down the road, there is like one, maybe two opportunities at the local level that exist, but I think that that will warrant some discussion around the glass because there have been two local companies, Helen Brand and Mobile, that have been very active in helping us budget and get us to where we've gotten now, right? And so I just want that to be part of your discussion in the event that you want to maybe look at re-strategizing that onboarding process and some of the effort that's already been done and not wanting to maybe close anybody out of that process as far down the road as we are. With that being said, the roadmap for the next couple of months, today is the day the teddy bears had their picnic. So the full package is going out for bid. We did receive bid package 3 on Friday. That'll be uploaded into our document control software and blasted out to the vendor community with a bid date of May 18th. On the 18th, we will extend, or there is an invitation extended to district if anybody wants to come to our office, and it would be like early afternoon to see how some of that sausage is made, how we collect the bids, how we do some of that initial vetting. So that bid day is May 18th. Depending on the timing of facility committee meetings, then on or about June 1st, we'd be prepared to make another batch of vendor recommendations that would include, cold form metal framing. I'm going to table the masonry discussion just for a second, but certainly cold form metal framing and glass and glazing. Get through that next batch. And then by the end of June, we should be in a position where the numbers are fully vetted. That will have given us enough time to go through all of the numbers, and at that time, we would be able to submit information around what the final GMP looks like, along with supplemental information. And supplemental information being anything that supports, the GMP and that type of thing. So we'd like to be able to put district and staff in a position by then to identify what might, what might we divvy up the balance of the contingency or what that might look like. And then going into August is when, the beginning part of August, again, continuing upon when facility committee meetings occur, we would essentially be in a position to make the rest of the recommendations for the balance of the vendors. That would be like site furnishings, asphalt pavement, landscaping, some finished components, and specialties. So we'll know enough in the end of June to kind of get us to that full GMP number with just a little bit of additional vetting to finalize some buyout on the backside. So that's in a nutshell what the next couple of months looks like. If that helps, or if there's any questions around that, I'm happy to try and address those.
So we would be looking at a facility committee meeting before the June, July, and August board meetings then.
Correct.
And then in July, we just have to pay attention to the 4th of July week, depending on when folks are gone. We're good.
Yeah, that's what I had that, like July 3rd facility committee meeting question mark because of that, around the holidays and whatnot. So at the end of the day, we want to just make sure that we're staying in line with some expectations that you all have and giving you an opportunity to get your eyes on things as needed.
So go ahead.
So I guess, going back to, how do we handle, local vendors, I know we've talked about it and we wanted to work with some that have given us nothing but grief and, from the standpoint of getting pricing and being able to handle the work. you know, if we are truly gonna work with the local vendors, you know, I think this is reasonable. You know, this bid that we just quoted, I think we have to be mindful that we want to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars. I think we've done a good job with, you know, steel work. You know, and if we follow that same process, you know, are we going to assure ourselves, you know, that we are going to, you know, get some competitive pricing, you know, as we go forward. And I guess what I'd look at, you know, when you look at the size and scope of the project, you know, you can't piecemeal events, you know, you can't give a little piece here and a little piece there, you know, for the same kind of work. You know, if they can't handle, you know, the project, then I think we've got to reconsider, you know, that type of work. And I guess the other thing you have to understand is, one, they have the capability. Two, are they willing, and will they be responsible?
Well, I can speak, I guess I'll say this around that. With the effort that's been, I would never, I guess, advocate for limiting that opportunity for competition. I think even in the instance where we're talking about two local glass companies, I've always been a proponent, and by the way, both of whom have been very, very responsive and are super eager and excited about this opportunity, right? And to me, that just lends itself as more information becomes available, i.e. this latest and greatest bid package that is the final bid package, right?
Let me clarify.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know, when we have a sole source, we don't have multiple steel erectors, we don't have multiple steel sources.
Yep.
I think we only have one concrete plant in the district.
Yep.
You know, when you're looking at you know, competitive bidding, I would suggest that you got those two. You know, we as a board said we're going to take local JP Collins or Fundor as vendors, so we were able to kind of wean that down, saying these people have the capability we want. So I would suspect that in a situation like that, we'd be able to do something.
Yes. But with that being said, well, I guess I would like a little bit more clarity around that. You know, my intention with this latest and greatest is to, you know, and I'll just use the glass and glazing as an example again. I would prefer not limiting it unless I'm given direction by you all to limit just to locals. I want to still get it out to the other vendors, to that part of the community.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of validity in that, and whether it's, you know, your check-in numbers or, you know, is everybody looking at the same kind of job kind of thing?
Yeah, I think what we have to do is to make sure that we get honest and fair bids.
Absolutely.
So if one vendor comes in $100,000 lower than the local, you know, I don't think we as a board can support that. You know, but if you're, you know, within, you know, maybe a 1 or 2% margin,
Sure.
you know, then you can sit down and say, okay, you know, that is prime. But if you're 5, 10, 15, 20% out, you know, I don't think anybody on the board is going to sit down and say, hey, let's go with that.
So Rich, you're looking at a process similar to what you did with the Russian. There's lots of bids and then we look at them in comparison with the local end.
That's exactly right. Yes, Joan, for every scope of work that remains, masonry, glass and glazing, framing and drywall, you know, all the way down the line, the process will be the same as we've gone through all along here. we are going out to a very, very broad vendor community with this. We don't want to narrow our lens. We want to get as many opportunities as, as many bids as possible, just to make sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck with your all's dollars.
So at either at the end of this meeting or the May board meeting, we'd like to then schedule that first full week in June. There'll also be a budget committee meeting, so Rebecca loves this, but we can maybe back them up. And then we'll look at either maybe the last week in June or perhaps somewhere along the 4th of July week. And then again in August, so we can get those dates going, so the process can keep moving.
Yes, I do have one special request, and that is, as it relates to masonry. And I'm not understanding how your all's protocol works. Would there be an opportunity if bids are due on the 18th of May? I believe that's a Thursday. Would it be possible to have a meeting just around a masonry recommendation? Or what would that look like? Or would we have to wait until that first meeting in June? The reason being, it'd just be good to onboard the mason, as early as possible.
So what timing would be ideal? Like, can you describe that for us?
If bids are for masonry, if the bids are due on May 18th, like I'd be in a position to where we could have some dialogue on like a week later kind of thing. So. But
That would be like May 20.
More.
potentially, yes, that's it.
Okay, why don't we look at the dates,
Okay,
try to figure that out.
You got a bunch of bids coming in at that time. Can you look at more than just the masonry? Can you come to a deal?
well, as I was preparing this roadmap at at that June meeting, I would look at trying to do the masonry, the batch that I had envisioned for that beginning part of June was masonry, framing and drywall, and glass and glazing. To get through those three major scopes in a week and have the conversations that need to be had and get responses back in all three of those trades, I'm not 100% confident that I could vet things to the level that I would be comfortable with and making recommendations on spending the district's dollars. So the thought would be maybe just to break off the masonry for its own dialogue, and then have, that
How long would it take you to do all three of us?
well, I'd be in a position to do all three of those by the time that first board meeting rolls around in June. But if I could get a week earlier on the masonry, that's ultimately what I'd be seeking. And I can map that out a little bit more clearly for Steve and send him those dates and
So-
give you an
So
opportunity.
what's a week gonna buy you?
As far as onboarding the mason? Oh, it buys us better submittal times, procurement times for them and procuring their block that they need for starting the firewall. Just an additional week for planning and onboarding.
Are you running into supply issues?
No, nothing like that. There's no supply issues or anything. It's more of a schedule driven thing than anything. I mean, at the end of the day, I can make the recommendation along with the other group. I was just wondering if there's any flexibility about having that masonry discussion early.
Well, we have to have two meetings then.
Understood. And if that's not something that you guys are, well,
We can talk about it, Rich, because in order to get the final approval, that would require a special board.
okay.
Because I can have like the committee meeting, but it would, in order to get the full board approval, I'd have to pull a special board.
Yeah, I don't know that I didn't mean to interrupt you there, Randy, but I don't know that, maybe it was an understanding of my lack of understanding on protocol and some of the special things that have to be done in order to pull together a board meeting. So
But
at the end of the day, I could just as easily make the recommendations at the June facility committee meeting, just as easily.
Well, I think you gotta do it at the board meeting.
But we may need a special board meeting to look at the search firms. That's gonna come up in that timeframe. And so we may be scheduling a special board meeting in May, because I know Brian Gabarsky, that's the timeframe he's looking at. So we may have a special board meeting coming in. But we'll know Monday.
Rick, why don't you, Steve, and I just kind of connect on that, and then we can bring that in on Monday, if we're gonna.
Okay.
With you, Joan, if there's gonna be a
Yeah.
special meeting of that.
Then we
nature.
could bring that in to that meeting.
Okay, sounds good. So the next topic is, Rebecca, if you could scroll, thank you. Approval use of the contingency fund. So Rich mentioned that as we move forward over the next couple of months, we will be finalizing what's called the guaranteed maximum price, which is the total cost, the do not exceed cost for the construction of the school. Within that is our contingency numbers, and you've seen them before in some of the budget updates. What we haven't talked about yet is really the actual process for use of contingency. I did include in your notes our standard purchasing policy, which could apply. So if this committee and ultimately the rest of the board wants to stay with what's currently in the policy manual, what's there right now is superintendent approval for between 10,000 and basically 25. And then anything over 25 requires school board approval. There are some exceptions in the policy, but generally speaking, that's what it is. Obviously, the scope of this project and the dollar amounts are much larger than what typically falls under our purchasing policy. So we've thrown in here for discussion the possibility of a different approval process during the project. And as an example, the one that I just put in for discussion, it would be up to $49,999 for the superintendent's approval. Or if Randy's off during a week, he would designate someone. The facility committee would step in if it's between 50 and 99,000, and then 100,000 and above for the school board. So at this time, we're just looking for your feedback. Want to know what your thoughts are, ranging from sticking with our current policy to maybe that's in your mind not high enough, or maybe something in between. And Randy, did you want to add it?
We did something similar to this in 2014. And the purpose was to keep the project moving forward without being delayed based on even before meetings. And Steve sat down and took a look at kind of what were the kind of some of the target numbers with Vogel to see kind of what would help move things forward. So that's what we came up with. And we're open to the discussion on that, but that's something we'd like to at least see as an option for us in order to keep the work moving forward without having to continue to pull back on. We're not anticipating huge change order items, but if there are things that come forward, we'd like to be able to make some decisions, move forward. Obviously, we'd inform the board on any of those items that would fall in.
Why don't we just follow the same process that we followed for the last year?
Was that?
I believe that was it.
That's it?
Yeah.
That was close.
I'm good with that.
One set in the precedent, just the same one.
I think we just need an approval of it because it would be a change from our current written policy. So this is kind of a policy just specific to this referendum project. So this would need to be moved forward to the motion so that we have the authority to approve the
Request.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Steve, you're the designee.
So you guys can't be gone with this.
Yeah.
Sleeping in the head.
Thank you for that discussion. Okay, the next agenda item is a topic that I did share at the last facility committee meeting. So we did have a interview process that the district participated in with Epstein Ewan. We did submit a request for quote to 7 different furniture vendors. Of the 7, we jointly selected 3 to interview. The 3 that we interviewed were Demco, Duet, and Atmosphere. So as part of the interview process, we did have representation from the middle school and Heritage, as well as the central office and then Epstein as well. The building level administrative staff went through the process of evaluating the vendors through site visits and reference checks. So as an example, Jeff at the middle school did have a conversation with Baraboo, who did use the preferred vendor out of the interviews for a very large project. And Jeff's recommendation is to use the firm Atmosphere. That's the firm that was used in Baraboo. At the heritage level, Danielle Dawson, the assistant principal, is the one who participated in the process. Her preference initially was Atmosphere as well. She had the opportunity to visit a school in Madison last week that they worked with. Both Jeff and Danielle sent me emails over the weekend that they both have the same recommendation, which is the firm Atmosphere. My question for you as committee members is, what do you think you would like to see and or the rest of the board members? Because we have obviously the request or proposal. We have the full responses from the 3 firms we interviewed. We also have their presentations that they provided during the interviews. So I could provide the information for the vendor that is the recommendation of both of our buildings. I could provide the documents for all 3 that we interviewed, or anything that you would prefer. I just don't want to clog up your board book too much for next Monday, but whatever it is that you would like to see, we can put in there for next Monday. Because I would want to have that recommendation from our building administrators on the agenda next Monday. So thoughts on what you'd like to see?
One, are all of these tied into the state contract?
That's a great question, Dak. So one of the important things that we did during the interview process was we specifically honed in on all of the contracts that any of these firms have. So they all have contracts that vary, things like the UW contract, the state contract, there's national purchasing contracts. So all of them have them, and that is the baseline expense. So you're not going to be paying more than what you would pay through some of these existing contracts, but then they all go out to the market and try to beat that pricing. So I can't remember off the top of my head which one Atmosphere has, but they all have that concept where they work off of purchasing contracts as their base discount, and then they seek discounts beyond that.
So when you go out to bid for, is this just kind of a negotiated type bid? Or do you actually look at specific tables and chairs? You know, how do you say, hey, you know, apples and apples?
Yeah, exactly. Yep, it's a great point. So what ends up happening is whichever firm we select does sample classrooms at the school, and they give instructors the opportunity to actually look at and use the furniture. That's where EUA comes in to help with that process of allowing at the site level to basically make choices of various pieces of furniture that they believe will meet their needs for the school. Once that process is done, then we go out to the market to then try to find the most cost-effective way to purchase said desk or table or whatever it might be. So it's a process that will evolve over time, but it will involve the schools and selected instructors basically using and testing out various types of furniture.
So in choosing them, their criteria wasn't a number that they're looking at. It's like they felt these are the most comfortable ones that we're going to work with.
Yeah, so all of them, what they did, like on the example of the cost area, they put examples into their proposal of what a sample classroom would look like off of a state contract. And then they shared what all of their contracts were. But then in the end, what it really comes down to is that selection of the actual pieces of furniture through the school level decision making, and then using those contracts to go out to market. And as a board, you would know that at a minimum, you are purchasing furniture off existing already negotiated discounted contracts. But that we are seeking to beat that because of the quantities that we would be purchasing.
So when you ask us what we need at the board level, I don't think we need anything more than the process and the recommendation from our administrators. I mean, we've already looked at EUA using this process. We voted on that. I personally don't need to see all that background.
I was just curious what their criteria is then, because we don't see their criteria, and we're just going with whatever. Maybe or maybe it wasn't the right criteria, I don't know, but we don't see them.
So you would like to see some of the,
Not the full extent of what he was all going through, but I guess I don't know. Breaking it out, what that would mean.
I think what could be helpful is I could include the information for at least the recommended vendor. So then you could see their contracts, you could see their process, you could see their example price for a classroom. And then you can have some of that background. And then we can always include additional information, but it'll definitely help define what that looks like. Because again, this is a little bit of a different process. EUA's fee is half of what it was in 2014. These vendors are expected to then do the design.
correct,
We are bringing forward ones that did not have the cost associated with it. There were some of the 7 that did, and we did not interview them. We just removed them from the process. So these were the ones that we felt were the most cost effective out of the 7. Then by including the information, it would be helpful for you to be able to see what contracts Atmosphere works with, what their process looks like, and then you'd have more background for the meeting. But I could do that instead of including all of them.
It's really hard to get a handle on whether you're getting a good deal or not, because, every room is different. You get 3 high tables and 6 high chairs and two rollers down here and 6 over here, and without really understanding what, and we give teachers the latitude to say, okay, I like high, people sitting on high chairs, and I like people sitting on low chairs, and I want a couple little pillows over here. It just,
I guess, because, yeah, it's such a
it's so nebulous. and so
subjective
fluid.
criteria. That's what it's more like you'd like to see. Not that I disagree with what the recommendations are, but
Right.
how can we as a board approve it, and what is the basis? That's what I can.
Well, I think, the way you pick out these vendors is just like we picked up the general contractor. At least the general contractor, you can kind of put some curve up, so that you see, but like the architect, that's kind of, we've worked with them in the past, and, they've done a good job, and they seem to be reasonable. Unless we dictate saying, hey, everybody's gonna have 6 flat tables and 5 high tops, and teacher gets 1 desk, it's really hard to do that. The only other way you could do it is say, okay, you get this much money per classroom, and you can't go over it.
There is ultimately a furniture, fixtures, and equipment budget that we will not exceed. So there is a backstop on the entire process. And then in addition to that, ultimately, Jack, it does break down into, not each classroom has to be exactly the same, but it does get broken down into what a typical classroom looks like. So what I'll do, I'm hearing that I can add some information to the packet, at least on the selected vendor, so you can get a chance to look at their contracts, their sample classroom, and other information. And then as you get a chance to look at it, if you have any questions, just let us know. because we can always put more information in the packet as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So for the next agenda item, we are really circling back to the topic of capital maintenance projects. At the last facility committee meeting, we had a couple of conversations. First of all, Pete's again here with us from North American Mechanical. If you remember last month, Pete talked through the highest priority projects that exist in the HVAC area. We also had the opportunity to share some project lists with you. The feedback we got back from the committee last month was to get this better organized into one place, so that it was a little bit easier to manage and easier to track as we move forward. Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the attachments. Be the first one. Oh, no, I'm sorry, the second one. Thank you. So to talk you through what we created, and if you go to the very top part of that, this is a tracking document on capital maintenance projects. At the top, what you're going to see is the total amount that was budgeted in the referendum. And if you remember, we had those 4 different buckets of money in the referendum, and one of them was district-wide capital maintenance. That's where that top figure comes from. We have projects approved to date. And so where you will see those is the approved by school board project area. So we have a section that shows you what has already been approved coming out of these resources. The bleacher extension budget of 500,000 is added into here. The reason why it's added in is the bleacher extension was actually in a separate pocket of money that was specific targeted projects. But in the end, we approved a Warrior Stadium project that included the bleachers, the track replacement, and related improvements. So here you see it all in one place. So that's an additional 500,000 that was originally set aside for the bleachers, meaning there's about $4.9 million remaining available in this particular bucket of funding. You do see a line up there that says to be determined, funds allocated from contingency or interest. And I want to talk about that for a minute. Rich mentioned contingency and guaranteed maximum price and moving forward over the next couple of months with Heritage. Eventually, we will get to the point with Heritage where we will have a final number. We will likely ask this committee if you are comfortable with moving contingency funds potentially out of Heritage. Depending on how all of the final budget figures come back, you may or you may not be comfortable doing that. We have to see the complete picture to be able to know that. But hypothetically, let's say that there is enough contingency in Heritage when the bids are done, that this committee believes that $500,000 could be pulled out of Heritage. One option, and there's multiple options, would be to move that 500,000 towards district-wide capital maintenance. Again, that's just one option, but it's an option. In addition, we've talked about interest earnings. Interest earnings can only have 2 things happen to them during a project. One is to go towards the debt, or 2 is to be used on the project itself, or it could be a combination of both. It's certainly far too early to weigh in on something of that regard. But the reason why we have that line here is you as a committee and ultimately the board may seek to move additional funding into this area as the project moves on. That's why that line is there. So as you go down a little bit further, you see the projects that have been approved to date. And then there's a middle area called pending projects where we do not want to lose track of what you've already approved, but it's in process. And so what's sitting in there is the softball field project. So you've approved a evaluation. That evaluation is taking place right now. And eventually we will be able to present that to you. So you can see anything that is in process. We're going to keep it in there so you know that it's pending. And then down in the bottom area, our intention is to then present what we are bringing forward in a particular month for your consideration. So if you remember last month, we had quotes on many projects, but we also we're still awaiting quotes on many others. Typically, the facility committee has approved about $525,000 worth of annual capital maintenance. The maintenance team has had a chance to go through in the last month and continue to work on gathering quotes, and has been able to put a complete group together that in the end is right now sitting at 517,000 of the typical 525 that we spend. In addition to that, at the very bottom of the list, you would see the 3 highest priority North American mechanical projects that you were presented with last month. Those projects are on there primarily because of the lead time. If you remember last month, we talked about, as an example, the chiller at Arboretum Elementary School, and that it could take up to 9 months for that to come in the current market. And it's at end of life at this point. So what you see in front of you is 517,000 of the 525,000 that we typically approve, and then the North American mechanical projects. Behind this tracking sheet, I just wanted you to be aware of the fact that there is an extensive project list that we are working with Vogel on. We are continuously reprioritizing those projects, just like we did with North American Mechanical. And as time goes on, we would put in front of you what we view as the most priority-based projects in order to get them accomplished. So this is a big list. This is going to keep Scott and John and our maintenance team pretty busy. So we're not intending to come back with another large list. This would really be the 23-24 capital projects list. We did include in your packet, again, additional information from North American Mechanical. Pete is here. If there's anything specific that you wanted to know more about those 3 projects, it's the same ones he talked about last month with some updated pricing. I want to turn this over to any questions that you might have of John. I know Scott's in the back, and Scott got quite a few of the quotes. Pete as well from North American Mechanical, and the folks who did the work in really preparing this list.
So Steve, we normally have about 525,000. We're up to 1.4, 1.5. Is that overage? Is that coming out of Fund 40 that we're shutting down?
Okay, I appreciate you asking that, Jack, because I didn't clarify that part. So the 3 at the bottom, so the 3 projects at the bottom comprise the HVAC budget of the $6.3 million district-wide capital maintenance funding. So when you go back, Rebecca, could you go up to the top for a minute? So that very top line that has $6.4 million worth of projects, we have a very extensive list. Those were the 3 HVAC targeted to come out of there. So it's those 3 plus the 517 that lines up with the 525.
Can you tell me what the 16 lockable restrooms what that is.
So there's been a request at the high school, working with Principal Borowski on helping secure the restrooms and some vandalism and that's been happening in the restrooms basically at the high school. The locks that they have there are similar to the ones at the PAC restrooms now, where they can be keyed locked from the outside. However, if there's somebody in the restroom for some reason, excuse me, they can get out, like if somebody's hiding in there, for example, they can still move the lever and get out of the restroom, even if it's locked from the outside. So Mr. Borowski would like to implement some of those to curtail some of the malicious activity that's been going on in our restrooms at the high school. Structures of property.
Okay, and then the front door canopy. So there was a pretty lengthy discussion at the listening session last week in this building, and there is a concern about the safety of that space and our front person, well, really all the people that work here, and putting in more of a secure entryway. Would you want the canopy with a secure entryway if we go that route, or have you talked about the secure entryway?
Sure, let's come up in conversation. As you recall, the canopy is an item that the board has looked at in the previous meeting and decided not to do it at that time. Excuse me. The canopy can help offset the secure entry component right now today. I'd like to make the recommendation to close the front door like we do at all of our schools and keep that secure during the day. And the canopy outside would help our visitors and staff members. If they need to wait outside for some reason, they can be slightly protected from wind and rain and snow. But employees will have access to our building through their card access. So
Can you explain what can you define canopy? What does that look like?
It would be the same material that, I don't know if you guys have seen the canopies we put on the middle school trailers. I know we all love trailers, but there's a very nice canopy that we put on the trailers from Baraboo Awning. It's basically it's a pliable plastic material. It has color to it. There's a couple of different options Baraboo Awning has provided for us.
So when you talk about secured entry, are you talking about building out
Yeah,
another
or building in.
or building in? something?
Building in or building out something so that people can be out of the weather, but still need to have somebody let them in.
But I think when you showed us some of your concepts, you actually had, some vinyl to protect from winter.
Yeah, that's
winter conditions as well.
That's the Baraboo Awning proposal. So the indoor, if we were to do a secure vestibule indoors, that would require engaging with a contractor like Vogel or somebody else to come and actually do construction, either inside or outside the building. And
Right.
we haven't addressed to that level. It's a much more costly, and this is 6,000. So if we were to look at creating plans for indoor or outdoor, either one, secure vestibule, it would be quite another process and more expensive.
So to your question though, Joan, when we looked at the 4 buckets of referendum money, one of them is very specific targeted projects, and Bethel Circle is in there. It's just on the back end. When we look at the order of work, the high school is going to become the focus after the middle school design is done. Prairie is probably next because there's quite a bit of maintenance work at Prairie, and Bethel is more on the back end as far as the priority list. So I do think a longer term solution will probably come out of that discussion, but it's likely to be at least 1 to 2 years down the road. The thought with having some protective awning, because we used to have one there,
Yeah.
is that we could much quicker start locking the door, and members of the public who would be coming here wouldn't be caught out in a
Yeah.
potential negative weather situation. I would describe it as a temporary move.
And
For
I
building
appreciate
security.
that. I wanted you aware that. I mean, there is a real concern
Sure.
about the lockability and the safety and the issues out here.
Yep. Any questions for North American Mechanical? I know that's one of the larger investments on this list, and Pete's here if you had any questions for him.
I'd make a motion to approve as presented.
The whole list.
And second,
All in favor, say aye.
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 Yes.
And we'll look at setting the next meeting Monday.
Yeah,
So-
we will look at that meeting potentially for the superintendent search as a possibility to connect. And
Right.
maybe we can avoid a facility committee meeting, Jack, and see if we can be efficient with our meetings, but we'll take a look at the next month and figure out a way.
Want to be, it's just.
Yeah.
The process,
Right.
you know,
Yep.
we can have two different meetings, but we still have to have a
Go
board,
to the
Right.
board
you
meeting.
know, to and you're not gonna give you a week.
Right, okay, we'll work on that.
Okay, so we need a motion to adjourn before Jack leaves.
Second.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.